Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is, and my name is Kathy Benuck. Today it is January 29, 2013. Can you believe it? Where does the time go? Today's subject is the educational farm at Joppa Hill, which from here on in I'll just call the Joppa Hill Farm. And as you can see very clearly, sitting beside me is my guest, who is Bedford's Town Manager Jessie Levine.
Hello.
Now, Joppa Hill Farm and some of the problems surrounding it have been in and out of the news for at least the past couple of years. But recently it has again become a subject of hot controversy, some of which could, I think, finally spell the end of the Joppa Hill Farm as we today know it. Now, to refresh your memory and just to set the stage for Jessie to be able to fully discuss this whole issue, I'm just going to give you a brief overall look, background, whatever you want to call it. The town purchased the 312-acre farm for $3.6 million in 2001 to preserve open space. And at that time, that really was the primary interest in the preservation of open space. At that time, there didn't seem to be any big drive or anything like that to operate it as a farm as such. The town then sold 120 acres to the town of Amherst, and that was to help them with their open space efforts. And then finally, 35 acres was leased to what was called then the Lakewood Educational Farm, after a plan was presented to the town council for the farm to be used, that portion, for educational purposes on the importance of agriculture to the people, to the community of Bedford, and to the environment. In very short order, that lease wound up being turned over to the educational farm at Joppa Hill, which of course still holds it today. And again, I said I'll just refer from here on in to Joppa Hill. And that was set up as a nonprofit organization. Now, things went, I guess you could say, reasonably smooth, or at least we didn't hear about any problems until about 2007. And at that point, a whole bunch of problems were uncovered, beginning what is really legitimately described as a 6-year controversy. That's how long it's been going on. Here we are in 2013. There are still unresolved issues, most of which got worse with this town property. And, you know, it seems to me, and this is now my personal little opinion that I'm throwing in, it seems to me that in addition to talking about the issues related to the farm and what the future of the farm will be, I really believe there needs to be a full and honest discussion as to whether or not Bedford taxpayers should bear the cost of even one more dime for this property. And I really do believe that part of that should include a full evaluation of how many Bedford residents actually benefit from the existence of that farm beyond the preservation of open space. And by that I mean, how many Bedford residents ever go there and use it for any purpose? And I really do believe that has to be part of the discussion, particularly if it ever reaches a point where they want to use taxpayer dollars for it. So anyway, before the show and through the months, I've read the chronology of events from 2001 when the farm was bought until now, 2013. I've seen the records and emails and so on related to many, many meetings that had been postponed and canceled. I've read the minutes of the town council where the issue of the Joppa Hill Farm came up, and in some cases the chairman and other members of Joppa Hill were looking for money from the town, taxpayer dollars, to keep the farm operations going. I've seen the deadlines for agreements between the farm and the town that were ignored over and over by Joppa Hill, and new extension dates then given by the town that were ignored too. Now, Jessie's going to walk us through the whole history, so I'm just going to right now give you what's in the news right now. And just in the past couple of months, originally Joppa Hill was supposed to sign an agreement sent to them on December 11th, and they didn't. Then on January 4th, a new agreement was sent to them, which set a January 16th deadline for their attention and signing, and they didn't respond to that either. So they then were allowed to answer by the 18th. Well, what wound up happening was on the 18th, there was a meeting held to presumably iron out differences in the agreement. At that meeting were the president of the board at Joppa Hill and possibly another member or two, I'm not sure. their attorney, the town manager, Jessie Levine, the town's attorney, and I believe 3 town council members. And presumably and supposedly on that day, an agreement was reached. So the town then gave Joppa Hill a couple of days for their board to meet and be able to vote on it and return it back to the town. And that was supposed to come back to the town just a few days ago on January 21st. Instead, on January 23rd, the town received a letter from the Joppa Hill attorneys saying that they weren't signing. And I'm almost done, but what kind of jumped off the pages to me when I read that letter was comments made by the Joppa Hill, and they said the town demands are virtually impossible for them to meet, and they accused the town of not putting these agreements down in good faith, and further went on to say that it was designed to result in the farm's failure to meet agreement terms. To me, that's pretty strong, incendiary language. To me, that kind of defies all of the records of the past 12 years. They then went on to say they didn't agree with the bond inspections showing risks, the inspections that we as taxpayers paid for, by the way, and I believe there were 4 different engineering studies done in the past couple of years. They said that they were not violating a lease by their lease to Benedict Dairy, even though this wasn't approved by the town council or anybody else in the town, and kind of was discovered accidentally. They said they want the contaminants that the town has said they will remove, namely asbestos, that they want the town to pay for and do that before they decide if they'll do any barn repairs. And they also claim the town doesn't even know what kind of a building it is, whether it should be classified as Class 1 or Class 2. So how should they be expected to raise any funds for the repairs? And of course that one really drives me crazy because they've had 12 years to raise money. So, Jessie, on January 9th at the town council meeting, you did a long presentation on the Joppa Hill farm, and then you gave another one on January 23rd, and at which point you made some recommendations to the council, and after a lot of discussion, everybody agreed to. So, now it's over to you. How about starting out maybe with a little bit of history leading up to all that has gone on now in the past couple of months and where we're at.
So the history before I got here, as
whatever way you want to do it.
I've been in Bedford now almost 5 months, and there were a few issues outstanding when I got here. Dog park being one of them. Obviously, the budget was another. And one of the big ones was the educational farm at Joppa Hill, because early this summer, Crystal Dion, who was the acting town manager, sat down around the table with a number of representatives from the educational farm at Joppa Hill. This was around May of 2012, and said, here we are, a year and a half at least since we first raised your attention, brought to your attention the serious concerns about the building, and nothing's happened.
And that even went back as far as Russ McCoo.
This went back, the original, the beginning of the conversations in earnest about the structural problems of the building happened in September, October of 2010.
Wow.
You referenced some inspections in 2007. There, our building inspector and fire department had done some inspections following what looked like some electrical issues. The town at that time notified the educational farm at Joppa Hill that they hadn't met licensed electrician standards, and that was in 2007, and the farm did go back and address those. So those were not hanging out there. In the fall of 2010, and honestly, I couldn't tell from my review of the records what triggered this, how the town ended up engaging in a more intense review of the building. But
didn't it have something to do with the insurance company raising some
questions? Well, that
was
later.
It was later?
Yeah, in December of 2010 is when a company called Castagna went and inspected the building and reported on the building, and that's when that was the first time that that was the quote, "There doesn't appear to be any part of the structure on the verge of failing. Continued neglect, however, will result in the building beyond repair in 2 to 3 years." So that was December of 2010. Prior to that, a couple of months prior to that, the town engaged Green Environmental. That's when asbestos was confirmed as being present in the ceiling. There was a reference to that in inspections that went back to the time that the town purchased the property in 2001.
That far?
That far.
Oh.
And I put together a chronology. It's now, I said 5 pages the other night at the council meeting because I had a different
Oh, I
size
think I
font,
actually read that, right?
Yeah,
Is that the one I
think
asked you for? Yeah.
It's 3 pages of 11-point font chronology of correspondence and meetings and inspections going back to 2001 when the town bought the property. And at that time, there was an inspection report. There is conflicting memories, I guess, conflicting stories about whether the town truly intended to save the farm or not as a farm or as the buildings. But early on, 2002, Carol Lake came forward and proposed that there be an educational farm. So fairly quickly, the town developed a lease, and that's when the educational farm idea went forward. So I guess in hindsight, I think had the town always intended to save those buildings, there would have maybe been a capital reserve fund. There would have been some maintenance plan, and certainly there would have been an obligation of the town under the lease, and there's no obligation of the town under the lease. So sometime in the fall of 2010, the town started to pay, for one reason or another, more attention to the condition of the barn. And in December of 2010, following the Castagna engineering report, the town wrote to the educational farm and said, hey, the lease requires you to repair the building. The lease also contains a provision by which the town will fund it with a payback period of 10 years. And so that letter offered to do that. You need to bring the building up to standard. We will front
and that would have been with taxpayer dollars.
Well, it would have been with taxpayer dollars front-ended and then repaid over 10 years. I actually happen to think loaning, this is not the Bank of Bedford, loaning money to a nonprofit organization is not our raison d'etre, but it was in the lease, and I can understand that the council was making that offer. That offer fell through. The conversation went back and forth between the educational farm and the council, at least through the following February, when at that point it kind of rose up to attorneys. The educational farm was represented by Mr. Brennan, the town was represented by Bart Mayer, and there was no agreement. And in the meantime, the educational farm had actually gone to the press and come to the council saying that they couldn't afford it.
I remember that.
And I can
remember they wanted money.
And they were looking for funds and actually looking for town support in the form of waiving a loan that was already in place. And actually, interestingly, is around that time, Michael Scanlon of the educational farm submitted a right-to-know request to Russ Marcoux, my predecessor. So while they're negotiating, there's also this demand for information.
What was the right-to-know request for?
Just he asked for any correspondence on this subject that had taken place. And then there's a gap in the records until August of 2011, and when Educational Farm had engaged T.F. Moran to also do an inspection. T.F. Moran issued their own report that did not contradict the town's previous reports. It was a cursory review, and it also raised questions about the condition of the barn. So that was in August of 2011. Again, conversation continued between the town and the educational farm in September and October, and then Russ passed away in November, and there was another gap of time. And then Crystal Dione picked up the conversation early that winter, and again, said, we need to develop a plan. At that time, the educational farm came up with a 5-year timeline for repairs, but asked the town to match its fundraising efforts. So they said they estimated
They're non-existent fundraising efforts.
They estimated a $180,000 project. They asked the town to contribute $100,000, and they would raise $100,000 and cover any contingencies, and the town said no. Then in April of 2012 is when our insurance company did an inspection, and that's when that kind of raised the concern to another level. And also in April, Castagna came back and did a follow-up to its report that was now 1.5 years old. And at this point, Castagna said, so 2 years ago they said, in 2 to 3 years, there will be a problem. And this time, 1.5 years later, they said the condition is becoming dangerous, the structure continues to deteriorate, In my opinion, it is unlikely that the building can be salvaged economically in its present condition and should be replaced. So that was in the spring of 2012, and that's when the town really started, I would say, kind of getting tougher with its message to educational farms, saying we really need to deal with this, or you need to move out, or public needs to be restricted. The other inspection done around that time was a company called Trexler Engineering. Our fire chief engaged Trexler. And Trexler is the one that introduced this notion of Category 1 or Category 2, Class 1 or Class 2 building.
Okay.
And that, in simple terms, Category 1 means it's a barn. It's an agricultural facility. Okay. You put animals in there and a few workers. Right. Category 2 is classroom.
And wasn't that part of their plan? They wanted a classroom.
If you remember, not only was that part of the mission, but actually the lease contains a requirement that they hold classes for Bedford, for the Bedford School District once a week. So the Category 2 is obviously a higher standard as far as
because people will be in it.
And probably more expensive to repair up to the So as of the spring of 2012, we've now had 4 independent inspections, all that the town engaged, talking about the condition of the building and the need. And 2 of those said, because Green Environmental, which was the asbestos analysis, and Primex, which are our insurer, they were silent on the cost of the total project, really. But Castagna and Trexler both said it's going to be much more costly to repair this building than tear it down. So and
that's believable.
And it's completely believable. Yeah. It's an enormous building, and
it is.
It doesn't really have any historical value. So I can understand if there's a historical association to try to. It's just a big old concrete and metal barn. So I
don't even think it's pretty, to be honest with you. I think it's ugly.
I agree. In May of 2012 is when Crystal, it seemed like, was making progress with the Joppa Hill Farm Board. And she wrote a letter summarizing a series of agreements that were reached in conversation in April and May. And that letter basically said, we agree that the barn is going to make, that the farm is going to make repairs without taxpayer money, and that as of October 31st, we will be closing the doors. And in the meantime, the doors would be closed to the public, and the barn agreed to that. And this summer they did post the barn that the general public could not enter. And then there was a deadline of October 31st being presented as when the doors would close. Educational Farm did not agree to sign that letter. There was a little bit of back and forth about one of the sentences in there that made it clear that taxpayer dollars would not be spent. The farm raised some questions about that. Crystal proposed alternative language, and nothing got resolved. And then we fast forward to when I started in September. So that's a tremendous gap over the summer, where really all that happened was the barn was closed to the public. I started in September. I met with Michael Scanlon and Annette Hardy in early October, and
for those who don't know, she is the one staff person, correct?
Right, she's the executive director of the farm. And they asked me to revisit this with them, to keep an open mind. I grew up, my next door neighbors and best friends growing up were on a farm. And so I have great memories and learned a lot, and I kind of like the idea of a farm, and I think every kid should have an opportunity to be on a farm. That said, I also believe that it's not a mission of local government to provide farm activities. But I did say, okay, I understand, and I, being new, didn't want to upset the apple cart. So I said, give me a proposal for what you want. If you want to negotiate an agreement, give me a proposal for what you want and what you plan to do. So in October 15th, I got an email from Michael Scanlon with a proposal that said, we would like the opportunity to repair the barn, ask the town to remove the asbestos, they'll go and repair the barn, and they can complete the work by the spring. So I drafted an agreement based on his email.
So they said originally they could complete the work by the spring.
Absolutely, and I still have that email. It was their schedule that said they can complete the work by
the same schedule
spring.
They're now howling that the town is being mean to them.
And that bothers me. That does bother me. And
would me too.
The other point about the spring deadline was that the the goal in my mind was getting the work done before they entered into another season
Right.
with people, because
Right.
the barn was closed and they did have to hold the classrooms in a tent. And that didn't, I don't think that bothered them, and then the kids were fine. But in my mind, let's get the work out of the way so that we can enter the spring season
Sure.
with a fresh start.
And meanwhile, stop the deterioration that's continuing.
Exactly, and get in there and get
Yeah,
going.
I mean, again, wintertime is even worse for
Right.
more.
Well, and I held my breath during the hurricane, and held my breath during the snowstorms.
Yeah, really.
In October, in November, I prepared an agreement based on Michael Scanlon's email, and met with Michael Scanlon and 2 other board members and said, okay, this is an agreement based on your suggestions.
And can I just throw in here, for those people who may hear names and they sound familiar, Michael Scanlon was a town councilor for several years, so
that's
he
my
wasn't
understanding.
exactly a neophyte dealing with the town or completely ignorant of procedures and such.
Well,
I
in
mean,
fact, I
this would
think
be
he
a
was on-
knowledgeable person about how things have to happen.
I believe he was on the council when the town either bought
I
the
think he
land
was.
or
Yeah, I believe
negotiated
he
the
was.
lease.
Yeah.
And he makes pretty clear in 2007 when the educational farm renegotiated the lease from 2002 that he was
Right.
involved with both. So
Right,
he,
so it's
he's
not a
been pretty clear
situation
about
where
that.
somebody kind of went in eyes wide shut, so to speak. I mean,
right.
if I went over there and then later I didn't know they meant that, that
Yeah.
kind of wouldn't apply with Mike.
Right.
And
right.
plus, on the board also is a sitting town councilor.
On the yes, Chris Bandazian is
Yes.
on the educational farm board. He does recuse himself from
I
the town
understand,
conversations.
but he
He's been
certainly
very
would be in a
careful.
position, and he's a lawyer, to be able
Right.
to at least walk them through
Yeah, and
what life is about.
I have no idea what conversations go
Right,
on the board
right.
end.
No, of course, right.
But so in November of 2012, I met with Michael Scanlon and 2 other representatives of the farm. We went over the draft agreement. They made some requested changes. I sent them another draft at the end of November, and then let's see, I asked them to get back to me. My notes say that on December 3rd, I emailed Michael Scanlon to ask if his board had discussed the agreement when they met the previous week. He contacted me and asked for 2 changes to the lease, and one of which I agreed to, the other one I talked through with him and didn't agree to. And then I also told him that in the meantime I had met with some counselors who had a couple of changes that they recommended, and one of those ended up becoming a deal breaker a month later, and that was the request that if the farm wanted the town to go in and remove the asbestos so that they could calculate how much work needed to be done, and then they decided not to do the work and we had to take the barn down anyway, it was going to be more expensive for the town to do that in 2 phases than to just knock the barn
Sure.
down to begin with.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
the council
And
asked,
isn't the asbestos removal somewhere in the vicinity of 40 grand or something like that?
It's 40 grand. Some of the bids have come in and it's better than that. However, we also realized that in the asbestos removal, we had to remove all the wiring,
Right.
and we wanted to put some of that back so that they could then have power when they did their work. So
that's added cost.
but it was still under the 40. But
Still, not money you just want to throw out,
exactly.
put down the drain.
Exactly,
Yeah.
especially if there's no firm commitment to go in and make the repairs, then the town didn't want to incur the cost of the asbestos removal because it would be cheaper, even though the total project would be more expensive. It would be more cost effective to remove the asbestos when we remove the entire building.
Of course.
Now, some would ask whether we have an obligation to remove the asbestos, and I would say yes, if we had an obligation to put a roof over the head of the farm, then it would be our obligation to remove the asbestos. However, that's not what the lease requires. It's their option to stay in the building. The lease gives them the obligation to repair, but also the right to make repairs. If they decide that they don't want to make repairs at a certain level, they can vacate the building. So it's not our obligation to continue to pour money into that building so that a private nonprofit institution
Absolutely.
can use it. So,
And I mean, there's no use the town could have for the building.
right. It's not.
I mean, you're
I
not,
would
you
rather
know,
put that money
The town
into
offices aren't going to move over there or
Exactly,
something.
exactly. I mean, I would rather ask taxpayers to put that money into, we're talking about building a fire substation, we're talking about bursting at the seams of Town Hall,
Sure.
a town office
Sure.
building, we've got roof issues.
Sure, priorities,
we
yeah.
have an infrastructure plan and it doesn't include this barn.
Right.
So that was, yes, as a landlord, you have an obligation to provide a safe residence or space for your tenant. However, if you're unwilling to do that, the tenant has the right to leave. And in this case, the town is unwilling to spend taxpayer money to remediate that, unless there's a commitment from the farm to repair the building, which we believe is their responsibility and not the town's under the lease. So that's been, I mean, it's been a little bit of a chicken and the egg, because they're saying, well, we can't make the repairs until the town removes the asbestos, and we're saying, well, we don't want to remove the asbestos until you commit to make the repairs. And by the way, all of these inspections say the cheapest thing to do is knock the building down, or the most cost effective. So I'm sorry, I feel like I'm going on and jumping around, but
no, you're going right in the order that it's all been happening.
So prior to the December 12th council meeting, Michael Scanlon and I talked about changes they wanted to the agreement, changes I was making to the agreement based on my meeting with a couple of councilors. On December 11th, I forwarded him the revised draft, and then the council took it up on December 12th and decided to table the conversation for a month.
I remember that.
In all fairness, I had not given the council enough time to really get into the weeds on it. So on December 13th, I emailed Michael Scanlon and said, you know, the council didn't take this up last night. You now have some more time to review the lease. Please let me know by January 3rd if you're in agreement with what I sent you. January 3rd comes and goes. I don't hear anything. So that is when on January 4th, and in that interim is when we discovered the sublease with Benedict Dairy.
That blew my mind.
It blew my mind.
I mean, how could they just like go and lease something to somebody on their own without anybody knowing about it?
And that's exactly, our lease is very clear that there shall be no subleases, no subtenants.
And they're saying that that wasn't very clear.
They have an agreement that gave Max Benedict and Benedict Dairy the right to occupy certain land in the building, which, I mean, I see
and the money
that as a
going
sublease.
to whom?
And the money going to
Joppa
the
Hill Farm,
educational
not to
farm.
the town.
Right.
Even though it's the town's land.
Correct. Now, I do have to
Can
say
I give that a shot somewhere in town? Some little lot of land or whatever, you know?
Honestly,
maybe run Sunday flea markets or something?
The council decided well before I got here that it was no longer going to provide any funding for nonprofit organizations in the town budget.
Yeah, because I remember last year there was a little brouhaha when Meals on Wheels had requested a few $100s or something, and it was a very lengthy discussion.
It's a tough decision that you know, there are philosophies on both sides. There are some towns that contribute to local nonprofits. There are others that don't. And Bedford at some point made that decision, and I respect that. We have a couple of organizations that have asked for fee waivers, and I've said we don't have a process. We don't have a caveat on any of our fees that nonprofits don't. That it doesn't apply to nonprofit, and therefore until we do, I haven't been granting those, and that's been a tough sell.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you can't give it to one and not the other.
Right, and so that's, you know, so that ergo some of the problems with the educational farm is that there has been this this inherent town subsidy of the operations, partly because they're deriving income with, you know, rent-free from the town. Also, kind of an aside deal, conversation. Somehow the educational farm at Joppa Hill ended up being the entity that manages the hayfield that's on the opposite side of the road.
And they're getting paid for that as well?
They're receiving free hay from the farmer that is haying, and then the farmer is also taking hay and selling that.
So he's making a profit.
The town's not getting anything, and it's not covered by the lease.
That.
So that's another thing that came up. But
well, while you're on that subject, didn't you also find out that the house that's on the property is also being leased to somebody?
The house on the property, and that's something where we haven't completely investigated that. The lease says that the house can be used by a night or farm manager.
But they don't have a night or a farm manager.
They certainly don't have a night manager that I'm aware of. They contend that the tenant there does 15 hours, 20 hours a week of work in lieu of rent. Yet their financial
15
statement,
hours a week work and you can have a house?
And their financial statement shows that there's actually rent being
There's
paid.
There's going to be a waiting
so
list.
It's a little, and in the meantime, what bothers me most...
I wonder how many of our listeners would say, hey, I'll work 15 hours a week for a free house no matter what condition it's in.
What bothers me the most is that the town still owns the property, and it's not the town's mission to be a landlord of residential property. It's not. I have concerns that something could go wrong with that house, and town will be the one
Of course.
liable. So that's the biggest issue.
Maybe it'll turn into a big party house.
I know. Well, I mean, and that's a concern. And so, but we have
Actually, I've heard rumors to that effect that was a party house some years back.
And I'm not sure what rights we have to evict if that happens, because we're not the ones who hold the agreement with them. And it's similar with Max Benedict. I mean, the dairy operation seems like an earnest and successful and kind of clean, good, wholesome dairy operation.
But why would not have the town known about it?
Right. Not only that, but the agreement was entered into at the very same time that we were telling the farm that we were concerned about the safety of the building. So we're telling the farm that we're concerned about the safety of the building. We want to start closing it down and keeping out the public, and they have this agreement. So now, all that said, the farm has they have terminated their agreement with Max Benedict. I understand he's relocating. He's kind of the innocent bystander in all of this. He didn't realize the extent of this conversation.
Is he local?
He is. He lives in Bedford. Yeah. He and his wife have organic farm certificates. They are dedicated to the mission of the farm, and so they have become kind of collateral damage with this, and I feel terrible about that. But they also, that's the information that we discovered between December and January that said, look, you're not responding to our requests on this agreement, and in the meantime, we've found this breach of the lease. So
now somebody's still living in the house too?
And somebody's still living in the house.
Wow.
That remains kind of as an aside, not going there yet, but it might still come up.
This is a great deal. Live in a house for 15 hours worth a week. You don't have to worry about a real estate tax, nothing.
Right.
What's the deal with the utilities? The farm paying for that too?
Yeah, either the farm or the tenant. The town is not, anyway.
Wow.
I can assure you that.
Neat.
So January 4th, after all this coming up, I at 3:30.
You have a lot more patience than I would have had, I'll tell you.
It really. I started out thinking, I'll work my way through this. We can all get along. We'll come up with a good lease. And the more time went on, and the more I realized that what I was experiencing was the same that my two predecessors had experienced. And I started to get, this is my time. It's taxpayer money. It's just not obviously time well spent. So on January 4th, I wrote a letter saying, look, we're done. You're in breach of the lease.
I'm amazed. In fact, one of the questions I had for you was, how could this have gone on as long as it did?
As long as it did, right.
Seriously, I mean, it just seems
I think part of it is it's a good mission. It's a good use of property. It's sympathetic, and nobody from the town really wanted to be the bad guy. Well, you're tougher than I am,
for some
I guess.
cantankerous.
We know you're tough.
Well, yeah, but I mean, let me also say, I mean, where in Methuen, Mass. I don't know if you're familiar with Methuen. There's this big shopping center that's now called the Loop, and it's big. I mean, there are all kinds of restaurants and big stores and theaters and everything else. Very popular down there. And that's relatively new, because before that was built, there used to be the mall, the Methuen Mall. And it was very, very big.
I do remember the Methuen Mall.
Yes, and it got kind of old and run down and lost a lot of tenants, so they wound up tearing it down and building this new jazzy Loop. Well, my only point was, where all of that stood, there used to be a farm called Miller's Dairy Farm, and that was my uncle.
Wow.
And that was my father's first job and my uncle's first job and everything. When they were kids, was going to work on the farm. And when I was a little kid, my mother and father had an ice cream stand on the farm, and I spent my summer days up there eating ice cream.
Great memory. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like I'm not sympathetic toward farms. I am.
Right.
But it is 2013, and I don't think I should have to pay for a farm in Bedford.
Right, and nor should you as a taxpayer have the safety liability hanging over your head.
No, absolutely not.
And that's, I can't say enough that it comes down to the condition of that building and the safety of the tenants. And we don't believe the lease holds us responsible for maintaining that building, yet we do think that as the owner of the property, we're ultimately responsible to what happens on the property. And so we wanted them to repair the building, and if they don't want to, if they can't afford to or don't want to, or
lights out,
then we'll be happy to take it down without even terminating the lease. I mean, at the time we said we will take it down, then you can rebuild what you want, which Councilor Ken Peterson had done some research and determined that a new structure could be put up for 80 grand. So at the time the estimates were 180 grand for repairs versus 80 grand to build new.
I mean, that's huge. That's a huge difference.
Yeah. So, so January 4th, I said, this is it. And in the meantime, the council added one more provision to the lease that, again, became a deal breaker, and that was that they wanted the farm to show that they had the money in place before work began.
Absolutely correct. Did they not do the same thing with the Bedford Village Common and with the Stephen Buswell School?
Stevens Buswell School, they did the same thing, right? And that's what was in the councilor's head. Not in my head, because I wasn't here for that history.
Promises
but
don't pay the bills.
It made sense. It made sense,
Yeah.
right? Well, and also, let's not have the building gutted,
Yeah.
asbestos removed, maybe even less stable, because those are the ceiling tiles, and then find out that we can't afford it.
They don't have the money to go ahead. Yeah.
So the record is clear, but the storytelling gets interesting. So I sent that ultimatum at 3:38 on Friday the 4th, after not hearing anything by the day before, which was a deadline I had asked for. At 3:50, I get an email back from Michael Scanlon saying, attached are my revisions to your December 11th version. I told you I would get them back to you this week. And I said, it's too late. My letter's out there.
Yeah.
The following Monday, I received the signed version of the December 11th agreement. So, I'd put down the ultimatum. I got edits to the December 11th agreement. When I didn't accept that, I actually got the December 11th agreement signed. So it's a little bizarre there. Then there was a request my ultimatum had that January 16th deadline that you mentioned. And just to correct your dates a little bit, the meeting where I kind of call it the summit meeting was Monday, January 14th.
Oh, it was the 4th. I'm sorry.
14th,
Yeah, I thought I thought it was Friday.
Yeah, that was before that January 16th deadline, and that was when 3 members of the farm board and their attorney met with me, 3 counselors and our attorney, and we said to the educational farm, okay, tell us what your problems are with this agreement, and let's try to work it out. And we thought we did. And that's really the blow to the council, is that on January 14th, we all shook hands, we smiled, we said we're so glad we could come to the agreement. The educational farm told us that they would be terminating the lease with Benedict Dairy, so that breach was not going to be an issue. That has happened.
It has happened. We know that for
sure.
So
we came to agreement. We thought it was all grand, and they held an emergency meeting that following weekend. And that's when we heard back that Monday night, and Tuesday I got the letter from their attorney saying that we can't agree to this because the town has set these demands that we can't
And you
can't
did
meet.
not operate in good faith, according to them.
Right. And after 2.5 years of trying to get this project done, and even offering to remove the building and taking it off their hands, I think that not operating in good faith is the last thing the town should be accused of.
No, I agree.
Have we
agree
dragged
on
our
that,
feet? Sure. Have we not held ourselves accountable to deadlines? Sure. But
well, one of the
was
criticisms, and I'm sure you've heard it, one of the criticisms, and I suppose I'd be remiss, otherwise I'll be, tarred as like, she hates the farm. I mean, obviously the Stephen Buswell School kind of sat around for a long time, having problems happen, and the town didn't step in, and then finally things started happening.
Right.
We saw a similar situation last year with Legacy Park and the ski trails,
Right.
and I don't think anybody meant any harm either on the town side or on the all the
Ski
willing and devoted
Right.
ski club members, cross-country ski club members.
Right.
But, I do remember doing a show on that last year and saying, I thought the town was being a little hard on them because the town, if nothing else, was guilty of a little benign neglect. So,
absolutely.
wouldn't you say that there's been some benign neglect as far as the farm goes, too?
We need to be better stewards of town property.
Yeah, it would
we
seem,
absolutely do.
Yeah, it would seem.
And whether that means holding those who have a lease accountable or putting a lease in place where none existed before, because, the cross-country ski, there was not a lease.
No,
it wasn't clear who those conversations...
And now there is.
And
now everybody knows what's expected and what the rules are.
And Stevens Buswell, I think there was some foresight for that has now benefited this conversation with the educational farm at Joppa Hill. Those volunteers are going gangbusters. They're fundraising
they've
phenomenally.
done an amazing job raising money.
Their ability to secure grants has been very impressive. And they even yesterday I met with 2 of the leaders of that project, and they hold in stark contrast to what the educational farm could
Oh
could
yeah,
be.
I mean they've done
really
a train.
could.
I mean I'll be honest with you, I wasn't totally convinced that was the greatest use of money or anything. You know, I mean it's a school building,
Right,
and there are
right.
people who live in town older than that building.
Yeah.
So I mean I wasn't totally convinced. But hey, you have to hand it to them. They did a great
They
job
did.
raising money. They're almost there.
Right.
Same thing with the Bedford Village Common. I mean, I did not think it should be taxpayer dollars building
And
it.
it was. I mean, there was a significant amount of recreation
Yeah,
impact fees
yeah.
that went to that
Yes,
project.
yes.
Yet they still raised $200,000
Yes, they did.
cash and
Yes, they did.
secured another few hundred
Yes.
thousand.
I mean, I think they would have preferred the town to have paid for it way
Right,
back
right.
when. I mean, I can remember testifying at a council meeting
Yeah.
on that. But the fact is, when the challenge was put back to them, they did it.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to grasp that when other organizations could do it successfully, and maybe not finished yet, but they're on their way certainly to being finished.
Right.
I really, truly, and I would say this if Mike Scanlon were sitting there instead of you, I really, truly can't have a lot of sympathy that in 12 years they didn't put together a
Right.
legitimate, working fundraising plan and have been doing it all along.
Right.
I don't get it.
Right. And, it's the town has not wanted to be the bad guy and still doesn't. I mean, we were ready to sign the agreement that we negotiated. We had a long meeting so that they could bring up any concerns they had. The letter rejecting the agreement brought up this question of category 1, category 2, and said the town, as you quoted, that the town didn't know what category. That's absolutely not true. The truth is, we
You don't
said,
know what they want to use it for.
no, even
There's a
more than that.
difference.
What I said, and I'm the one who said it, is I'm not the code inspector. We have a building inspector whose job it is
Sure.
to interpret code.
Sure.
The conversation needs to go between the applicant and the building inspector. As town manager and as town council, we should not tell the building inspector how to do his job. I mean, this is one of the most objective jobs there is. If we start interfering and saying, well, on that building,
Yeah,
why don't
exactly.
you? I'm not the code
Yeah,
expert.
yeah.
So we actually built into that agreement when we met on January 14th, 2 more weeks of time so that they could go meet with the building inspector and they could have a conversation about what the proposed use is. And he could say, if you're going to just use it as a barn, this is the code. If
Right.
you're telling me you're going to use it as a classroom, this is the
Yeah,
code.
if you're going to have
wasn't
50
a-
kids in there, there's a little bit of a difference.
and that's
yeah.
not a conversation that I should have. So we did, and then the other complaint was that they couldn't determine the level of repair needed until we remove the asbestos, and that is true to some extent. However, we would have removed the asbestos had they signed the agreement that said either we do the work or we tear it down. So it's a little circular, and we kind of feel like the town can't win.
And
This
if
is
I'm not
taxpayer
mistaken,
money.
the town also said that they would waive all of the permit fees and everything
Correct.
else for them.
Correct.
Which in itself is a concession because
Right.
it is a nonprofit organization.
Exactly. Yep.
And that would be income to the town.
Right, but it is repairing a town building, so we said, okay, you're repairing a building we own, so to
Well,
charge you
yeah.
to repair a building we own seems
Yeah.
disingenuous
Well, yeah.
also, but yeah, I mean,
50-50
it's, well,
kinda,
and we were
yeah.
trying to give some and get some, and it's unfortunate that it just kind of became, that's it, we're done. So our approach at this point was, okay, this agreement would have given us the opportunity to repair the building. It would have also given us the opportunity, because there was language in there about renegotiating the lease for a longer term once we
They
got
wanted
through
30
this.
years, correct?
They wanted 30 years, yep.
I probably would have shut up at a council meeting complaining about that.
Well, that's fine, that's your right.
That seems to me
That's
like a
your
long
right.
time, you know?
And, the funny thing is, I was willing to negotiate into the lease an agreement that allowed the type of sublease with Benedict Dairy that is not allowed under our current lease. I would have also asked to negotiate a lot clearer language about who's
Sure.
responsible for the buildings
Sure.
and what the uses can be, but that's negotiation. So at this point, all bets are off, and our attitude is they are in violation of the lease by not maintaining the building.
Now, what if they come back now boo-hooing, going, sorry, can we start over again?
Well, I think, I guess it would be unrealistic in a community in a small town to say, forget it. If there's still a real interest and a commitment more than anything to finish the work, I think the council would be willing to have that conversation.
Yeah, but is that going to drag on another 6 months or a year or 5 years or whatever?
6 months is actually roughly what it would take if we had signed the agreement. A year.
Yeah, but
if
the
there's
6 months, a lot would have happened.
Right.
I mean, because the town was going to go in, within 30 days for the asbestos removal.
Yes.
And then they weren't they expected within another 30 days to start their end of it?
Yep, they had to hire a contractor and get plans
so
together.
So this would have been done 6 months from now, all that part of it.
Right, right. A year, I don't know how much longer. I mean, a year, if work is being done in that year and the building is at least stable, if not beautiful, then maybe that's okay. It all depends on, again, the other thing I was trying to get.
What about the risk, though,
well,
to
I
the
was
town
trying
between
to get,
now and then? I mean, what if some night the place goes up in flames?
Well, and I was trying to get the, that would do us all a favor, I suppose, unless there's money in there, but I was trying to remove the management and the council from the conversation about safety and occupancy. I mean, we believe it's unsafe now, but once the work begins, that's up to the building inspector.
Sure.
And if he needs to bring in a third party to assure the structural, I didn't want me to be the one to judge what's safe. We really have tried to keep that independent. So along the way, they would not be able to occupy the building again until a certificate of occupancy was in place, just like any other.
And they're objecting to that, aren't they?
Well, they just didn't sign the agreement. They didn't object to the CO in particular, but we were just trying to treat them like we would any other building that was being renovated in Bedford. So, in the end, I think I'm really sad. The council's upset that this has this antagonistic overtone. We shook hands. We thought we had worked it out. It is a beautiful spot, and it preserves Bedford's agricultural history, and that's really neat. It's a neat opportunity to do that.
I think what people need to understand, though, is even if the barn is torn down, an educational farm at Joppa Hill, the nonprofit, just kind of goes away in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
We've still got the land.
Yes.
It's still ours.
Right.
It's still open space.
Right.
And that was the intent of all of us agreeing to buy it to begin with.
Right.
I mean, truth be told, do we need that kind of ugly old barn sitting there? We really don't.
No, I don't think we do.
We really don't.
Do I think there's an opportunity to make some better use of that land and have a better benefit? Yes, I do. I mean, the haying of the fields is an example. Hay, farmers sell hay for money.
Yes, they do.
If they're making that money off of town property, the town should be the one that's receiving
some income from
some
it.
benefit.
Absolutely.
The farmer obviously should get paid, but the town should get some income. If Benedict Dairy is a for-profit, maybe not profitable yet, but a for-profit organization, if he's occupying town money for his town property for his business, state law requires us to tax him. It's a requirement.
Well, of course, yeah.
So it's things like that there could be some benefit, whether it's financial or just kind of greater use of the property. I certainly am not trying to dance on the educational farm's grave, but what I tried to say to them is, look at this as an opportunity. If the town removes the barn, look at it as a clean slate. Do you need something that's that enormous? Could you scale down? How could you use a big, acre-size piece of ground? So, I see that there's still. I wouldn't want to necessarily see this prime agricultural land grow in if that isn't the best thing for the town of Bedford. But it's really the town of Bedford I'm worried about. So.
As you should be.
Right.
And as we should be,
yes.
quite frankly.
Yes, and going back to the beginning, I don't think there was the intention to do anything with that farm other than kind of have...
There doesn't seem to be any record of such.
Right.
And, and again, where I opened up was, and I really feel strongly about this, it's all well and good that some little events are held there, and I know my cinematographer director has been over there with his cameras, taking films and tapes that wound up on BCTV of events that were there. And, even the ones I've watched on TV, I see a few cars in a parking lot and, a few people running around, but certainly not crowds.
Yeah.
And, I've asked so many people, have they ever set foot on the place? And the answer has been no. I've driven by, but I've never set foot on the place. So, I'd be interested in hard, cold numbers.
Yeah,
show me what you've done in all those years.
Right.
How many people actually did sign up for horseback riding lessons? Or how many kids actually did go to camp? Or how many people actually showed up in 2010 or 2011 or 2012 to your Joppa Hill Farm Day?
Right.
And I don't think the numbers are there.
Yeah, and
I really don't.
we've actually had people say they didn't even know where it is.
Exactly.
It's in the middle of town
Yeah,
in this
exactly.
beautiful space. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's, and I have to say that with the recent press around the town drawing this hard line and
Well, some
talking
people
about
now are like,
terminating,
where is it?
well, and I've had nobody other than those associated with the board say that we're doing the wrong thing.
No, there's been no letters
by-
to the editor
right.
or people blogging or,
Right.
or anything else.
Right.
I mean, I wrote a blog on it the other day, and there wasn't a
Any
single
comments on
solitary
that?
comment. None.
Yeah.
None. And I mean, if people get fired up, they may not answer. And I've said this even in the blogs. Most of the time, they won't answer to my blog, but they'll send me an email
Yeah.
or a phone call.
Yeah,
ranting and
yeah.
raving.
And say right on or wrong.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Whatever, right.
Because people are always kind of a little paranoid about getting their own name under their on in print, even if they can use a pseudonym. They're always worried that somebody will figure out who they are.
Right.
But they've got no trouble sending me an email. I've caught in some dillies.
Yeah, and you get good information that way. I mean,
Excuse me.
I am more than willing to take criticism or
Oh, I know, you
or
get broad shoulders.
commendations, whatever people want to say. We get good information. If somebody called and said, "Look, I know that back in 2001 this was the town's mission," and or my child goes and whatever the stories are.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
haven't heard, and none of those have come out.
Yeah,
about
and
it,
I mean, you would think that if it really were a burning issue for people, well, if it were, they'd be there. They'd
Right.
be there howling. I
Right.
mean, you know that, and I know that, and we certainly saw evidence of that with the park, the common.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly saw evidence of it with the Stephen Buswell School. We certainly saw evidence of it with the ski thing.
Right.
Right. I mean, people showed up and they had a lot to say, and they were fired up, and they wrote letters to the editor, and they went in and testified, and sometimes almost in tears.
Yeah.
So there was a passion there, and it's not there on this one.
I
It just
agree.
isn't.
I agree.
And they've had, a while to react, because it's not like all of a sudden you just sprung it on them. I mean, December to now, we're talking almost 2 months.
Yeah.
So if people had some strong feelings, they've had a lot of
2
opportunity
months after 2 years, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I
Right.
mean, even this, this news stream of it. And it's been
Yeah, and I think-
advertised that it's been on the council agenda. So, I mean, if people
right.
really were worked up,
Yeah.
I think they would have gone in.
And maybe what it also shows is, what the tempest, this is a tempest in a teapot for us. I mean, it occupies a lot of time and thought for me, the public works director, the fire chief,
Yeah.
the building inspector,
Yeah.
the council. But in the grand scheme of things, people don't seem all that worried.
I don't
It's
think they
just-
are.
it's
I
just
genuinely
us.
don't. I mean, hey, I'm not saying I'm unsympathetic to the people who worked on it, who believed in it, but I mean, I'd call myself an activist, and I know if I feel very strongly about something, I do more than talk about it. You put your shoulder to the wheel and you get it done.
Right.
And they're not putting their shoulder to the wheel and getting it done. They didn't before, and they're certainly not giving evidence that they're willing to now.
Right.
It seems like they're pulling excuse after excuse, wah.
Right.
The town's being mean to us, and how can we raise money?
Right.
Well, I mean, as an observer, I say, get over it.
Prove us wrong.
Hey, yeah,
Prove us wrong.
and why would they expect the town to start throwing money at it and be unwilling to say, okay, and here's our bank book, and we are raising money, and they're fighting that. So, I mean, why should the town do a thing
Yeah.
on a promise of dollars?
Right.
Promises mean nothing.
Right.
And if that sounds hard-nosed, well, it won't
Well,
be the first time I'm called hard-nosed, Now, I got a couple of quick questions for you, just that I'm kind of thinking like what other people might say.
Okay.
When we, talked about the original 312 acres, I know Amherst was sold 120, and then the farm itself had the 35. So that leaves 157. Are those the ones that are all being hayed, or some of them
No,
just
not
sitting
all
idle?
of
or-
it. Some of it, there are different uses. Some of it is being hayed on the eastern side of Joppa
Okay.
Hill Road. Some of it has been developed into the playing fields. That there's some
Oh,
soccer
yeah,
fields
that's right.
up there.
I forgot about those, yeah.
A lot of it is managed by the Conservation Commission. There are trails and snowshoe trails that go back down and actually cross
forgot
into the
about that,
Amherst
too,
land.
yeah.
So
I actually forgot
a
that,
lot of
too.
it is under conservation easement with the Bedford Land Trust. Interestingly, when I read that easement, the town actually identified that in 20 years it reserved in the easement the right to look at use of portions of that property as a town campus. So whether the town wants to move the town hall, or and I don't,
that'd
I
be a
just
good
think
use
it was
of
the
it.
council at the time saying, we don't want to, you know, if we
yeah,
need
but I mean, that would be
space-
a good use of
Yeah,
it.
it might be. I mean, it's not, I kind of like the town hall to be in the center of town.
Well, yeah, I know.
But just to reserve the right for some municipal use if it's necessary at that time in 20, 25
Yeah, and it wouldn't
years.
ruin it because it's a big place.
Yeah, but I didn't look at the map to see exactly which, if they even identified which land that was.
And
But,
with all
yeah,
the
so there are
scrambling
multiple-
for sports fields and everything in town,
Yeah.
and I mean, that would obviously be a good use of the land.
Right.
I don't think anybody would complain about that.
Well, and that's been pretty successful, I think,
Yeah,
having the fields
yeah.
up there. It's a beautiful.
And
I
that just
can't
seems all
imagine
the sports
standing and
programs
watching a
seem-
soccer
yeah.
game up there would be
Yeah.
wonderful.
And all the sports groups seem to be growing like crazy.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep, they do.
You know, I guess they're all scrambling with each other for field
Seems like
time
it.
and, you know, everything.
Seems like we can't have enough fields.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, this is
Yep.
a sports town for sure with the kids. Now, of course, I think I've gotten across that I don't think the town should be paying for any of it. But if, say for instance, this had been the perfect world and the agreement was signed and the town was going to pay for that, whatever it was, 30,000 or whatever, for the removal,
Right.
the asbestos
Right.
removal. Well, I mean, that wasn't like a specified item in the budget.
Correct.
So where was that money going to come from?
Well, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
That was something that also had been hanging out there for a while. We had hoped, part of the reason we had hoped to have that agreement in place before January 23rd was so that if we did have to
Wiggle
ask
them in.
taxpayers for money, we could amend it at the second public hearing. We, of course, knew the day before that it wasn't going anywhere, so we didn't end up amending the
Okay.
budget. So unless, if for some reason we moved forward with the asbestos removal, and we knew we were doing that before the budgetary town
Something
meeting,
else has to be taken out.
or we could amend the budget on the floor of budgetary town meeting.
Okay, but if
Not
it
sure I
came
wanna
after
open
that,
door.
you're
If it
gonna have
came
to
after that,
forget something else.
either we postpone it a year
Yeah,
and we just board it up and
Which
not
is
do
not a good
anything
thing.
until town meeting, or we do that instead of something else. Or the other option that the council, well, they haven't discussed any of this at this point, but the other option I put before them that was actually originally raised by Chris Bandazian in September 2010 was that the council has a land fund, a fund that that the council has control
Oh,
over, the
okay.
purpose of which is to purchase or manage land. I thought, actually this, as I said, Chris Bandazian originally brought this up. Crystal brought it up at one point, and the consideration is if that barn is restored to land, perhaps a land fund could be removed, could be used for the demolition.
Okay.
But it hasn't been decided. One way or another, it's money that would otherwise be
for something
taxpayer money.
else.
Right.
Okay. Now, as far as the cottage go, I don't think I asked you that. Do you know how long this has been going on, that somebody's been living in there? Or is
well,
this one of the mysteries of all this
I
over
don't
there?
know how long their tenants have been in there, but my understanding is that somebody's lived in that cottage since at least 2002.
Seriously?
There were some, actually the interesting thing is the '02
Wow.
lease, the lease from '02 to '07 required.
So what they have to do back then? 2 hours worth of work?
I don't know, that language has been the same. The farm,
15 hours?
the barn can, the house can be used for a night or farm manager, that's all it says. It doesn't define the terms, doesn't define money changing hands or anything like that, so it's a little vague. But it could be as much as 10 years.
Unbelievable. I'm telling you, nice work if you can get it.
Looks like I stumped Kathy Benuck. I didn't know that was possible, but
Now, see, if you knew that, maybe you could have finagled as part of your contract, throw in the house. I mean, that would have saved you a heck of a lot of money, Jessie.
I don't think they'd want me as a neighbor up there at this point.
Yeah, but it'd be so quiet. Nobody
right.
would even know you were in there,
Right, yeah.
Does anybody know? I mean, until anybody found out, did anybody even know there was anybody in there, for God's sakes?
Yes. I think.
Yeah?
I mean, I think the
Some of the
town has
neighbors?
known. I think the town has known. That house is right on the street. It's pretty hard to miss that
Yeah?
somebody's there. Yeah.
God.
Yeah. It's unraveling.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is kind of intriguing. Well, believe it or not, we have like maybe a minute and a half left.
We
and
managed
this
to
has
fill
been
our
we
time.
do. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I mean, I guess I've managed to show a little bit of my bias,
Yes.
which I try not to on some issues, and on some issues I don't mind showing my bias. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't be willing to hear the other side, and if the other side would like to come in
Great.
and talk, I'd love to
Great,
hear them
absolutely.
and throw them a couple of questions, and
Yeah.
maybe they can convince people. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if they'll convince me, but I'd give them the opportunity to
I
convince
think that
other
would be great.
folks.
I think I think this has got to be a very public conversation. So.
It should, yeah, it should be, yeah. But is there anything now? I'm just going to throw it right at you. how you want to end all this and
no,
what you want people to think
I
about.
appreciate the floor you gave me, and I hope I didn't bore people to death with dates
I
and
don't think so.
timelines. But I think the only thing I want to express is that this isn't a gleeful exercise.
No, I know.
It certainly is emotional, and people on both sides of the conversation are disappointed, and that's not the way we want to have a relationship with our residents, and that's too bad.
Well, I was not in the council meeting room the night of the meeting, but I was watching it on TV.
Right.
And you did look emotional.
Yeah, I was
and
and
concerned.
the councilors were upset.
Yeah, I could see that
Yeah.
visibly on some of their faces. You
Yeah.
could tell that it was a tough one for them.
Right.
And even when they went around the table, did they agree with your recommendation? I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't like, yeah, you know.
Right. No,
You
nobody
could
came
tell
about
they
this
were thoughtful
easily.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're probably shocked that I agree with them, huh?
You're getting soft.
You think? I just don't have to toughen up. Well, everybody, we call the show Tell It Like It Is for a reason. And once again, Jessie has delivered. Thank you, Jessie,
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Thanks for
and
having
dying
me.
to get you back. Talk
I'll be
about
back.
dog parks and all
Oh
kinds of
boy,
good stuff.
I can't wait.
Yeah, I know it, huh?
That's right, thanks.
Little did you know what you were getting into.
That's
Bedford,
right,
huh?
I know.
Well, anyway, I hope you all learned something today. You've certainly seen this issue in newspapers, maybe turned on a council meeting or whatever, but this will bring you up to speed. And again, where it will go from here, I don't know. I suppose there's still some possibilities, but it's still, to my way of thinking, seems closer and closer to the fact that the bell is tolling for Joppa Hill Farm. And do we care? I don't know. You can answer that. All right, thanks for watching. Until next time, you keep on telling it like it is too. Bye-bye.